The cool thing about Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is that they introduce an instrument as a mechanic, right? This is news to no one. Everyone knows this. There's an ocarina in the game that you pick up kind of early on, and then you get the Ocarina of Time like halfway through. And the whole thing is that you learn pieces of music. You learn the first few notes of pieces of music, and when you play them, it triggers the whole song to be played, and then it will have various effects, right? You can warp to different places, you can change the weather, you can open doors, you can call your horse. But the cool thing is, right, is that you have control over only 5 notes in the game, all right? If you remember, the ocarina was A, C down, C right, C left, and C up. Those are your 5 notes. You could do a bit of vibrato and pitch bending with the thumbstick, which is always kind of cool. Obviously, spent way too long on that when I was a kid, mucking around with different songs and stuff. But you have 5 notes. D, F, A, B, and then D again. So actually, you only get 4 notes. You get 5 notes, but 4 of them are unique. D, F, A, B, D. Let's talk about those 5 notes, right? Because it's kind of a weird choice if you think about this in the context of D minor, which it would be a reasonable thing to assume, considering out of those 5 notes, 4 of them are. But there's a B thrown in there, which is weird, because that's kind of a discordant-y sort of chord. But what it means is those notes, if you take 1 or 2 of them at a time, you can use those notes to not just sound like you're in D minor. You can use a couple of those notes to sound like you're in a completely different key, which is the really, really cool thing. There are I think 12 different songs that you can play in Ocarina of Time. And all of them at least start with one of those 5 notes. So let's go through them and figure out maybe what he was thinking while he was writing them, right? So the first one I think you learn is Zelda's Lullaby. So straight away, that doesn't sound like we're in D minor anymore, because we're focusing on that B. Then we hit the D and then down to the A. There's no F in there, which is like the minor third of D minor. So there's nothing to indicate that we're in a minor key. So those are the notes. And then the rest of the melody that plays after you finish playing it goes. And so the really cool thing here is that he's using that first note B as a major 7th of C major. So it's kind of like a weird, it's not the strongest interval ever, the major 7th. Especially in the context of C, that B is kind of weird. But the second chord there is a D major. So we're going from C major to D major. Those are the 2 chords for that bit. And those simple notes there means that we're nowhere close to like a D minor kind of feel. So that is the part of the tune that Koji Kondo has to allow you to play with the 5 notes, and from that point it kicks off the rest of the song. It triggers the rest of the song, and then he has a bit more freedom to then write something a bit more cohesive with a bit more freedom. So you get, and then you get. So suddenly it gets a lot more interesting harmonically. We've gone from a very simple, and then we get a G over B major, and then a B flat diminished, which resolves down to an A minor 7, which goes up to D major, and D major is the 5th of the key that we're in, which is G, I guess. So there we go, Zelda's Lullaby. There you go. So it's using the B, the D, and the A out of the D, F, A, B, D notes. So that's the first one you learn. I think the second one you probably learn is... So right in the middle of these 4 notes, sorry, 5 notes, you you take the middle notes, you end up with those 3 notes. And this is really cool because if you take that as the root of a chord, you say like F major, right? So we're in F, A, which is the major third, and then B creates this weird dissonance. It's also kind of Lydian in nature, if you want to talk modes, which is a major scale with a sharp 4. So that's all you need to play is those 3 notes, and then it kicks off the rest of the song, which... And then again, we resolve to a C major, but that C major has got that B on top, which is the major 7th, which is, again, not the strongest solid sounding chord ever. If you could go... And that's it's a stronger sounding chord. It's a bit more sturdy, but it doesn't sound right. It's lost all of its beauty and its nuance, and it's just now, here's a C major chord. So you get... Which is kind of cool, because that F is setting up so much tension. Those 2 notes want to resolve to something else, but all this tension, and then it resolves to something which still kind of has tension because it doesn't have that root note on top. So it's resolved a bit, but not all the way, which is kind of cool. So using those 5 notes, we've already had 2 songs that are in completely different keys. They're using different modes as well, different tonal centers, completely different energy. So far he's created 2 very unique pieces of music with very, very few notes as a starting point. Song of Storms, which is D, F, and then up to D. And straight away, it's kind of inescapable. We're in D minor, right? You could phrase this in a different way. We all agree that sounds weird, right? The first obvious point is... So we're firmly in D minor. So those 5 notes that we had originally, where it was heavily emphasizing and indicating D minor, we're right there now. We're leaning into it. So those are the notes that you have to play. And then once you do that, it plays... which is really pretty. And it just highlights this A minor on top. Kind of end with this A minor second inversion, which is nice. And then a much more complicated melody than you can handle on the 5 notes of your ocarina. But again, he's taken the really super simple intro and then embellished on it. And I think that's the cool thing about all of these tracks is that there is no choice other than to start simple. You've got 5 notes to pick from. You can't expect people to go crazy, right? It's also a very memorable melody, right? Everyone can whistle that. Everyone hums it. Everyone knows it, right? So there's a full-on D minor piece. So 3 tracks in and we've gone from 3 very different keys. And also we've had some that are major, some that are minor, some that are major with a sharp 4 thrown in there to give you like a weird little sort of tension, optimistic kind of thing. A really cool like limitation that Koji Kondo would have been set with, you know, like I got no choice. I have to write good music using only 5 notes. But the trick is that he writes the first part of the tune with only 5 notes, and then he's allowed to embellish a little bit because from that point onwards, the player doesn't have control over the notes. The song just sort of like takes over, right? You play the first bit, and it's almost like you go, oh yeah, okay, cool, I know how it goes, and then Link plays the rest of the song on his ocarina. But it is cool. Working with limitations is how you ended up with just incredible games and incredible soundtracks from like NES and SNES games. Love it. So that's 3 songs. What else have we got? Song of, what is it, the Sun song? So that's the piece of music that you play in game to change the time of day, right? In the middle of the night, you play that song and the sun will just immediately come out. And the really cool thing about that is that it's the first little bit of Hyrule Field it's the first little bit of the main theme of Hyrule Field from the same game, right? So the notes that you're required to play there are A, F, and D. You play it twice. And yeah, as I played before, it's... So really, that's not even like a melody. That's the really cool thing I love about that, is that all of these other ones we've been playing, that's the main melody of that track, right? That's the main hook. It's all like you're playing the key part of that song. Whereas right there, all you're doing is you're playing the little like intro flourish bit, which could very easily get missed, and it's not... It's like the opposite of the main focus of the main Hyrule Field theme, which is kind of cool. And when you sort of first done it, you're like, oh, hang on a second. Yeah, I've heard that before. Kind of like you did with the other ones, right? When you learn Saria's song, you're like, oh, I've heard this one, this tune, like Rolling Around the Lost Woods. Epona song. So this is another example where, because you've got these weird choice of notes, the cool thing is, right, is that the bottom half of those notes is minor. The top half of those notes is much more major. So I think that is probably why he chose those 5 notes in particular. Despite the fact that it's kind of jarring when you play them all together, what it does is it gives him a bit more freedom to... Okay, I want to write a minor melody, no problem. I've got D minor all over the place to muck around with. I want to write a major melody. Well, I've got that major 6 right up at the top with that B, and a root, and a 5th, and another root. So those notes are all from a major scale. And because he only has to write the first couple of phrases, or the first phrase really with those 5 notes, he's then got the chance to then write something a bit more solid and a bit more developed after that. It's a very, very, very cool, very interesting, very unique set of parameters that you have to adhere to write every single piece of music in that game. It's really, really amazing. Like, absolutely amazing. So, Epona song. Those are the 3 notes that you have to play. And then it actually extends to the point where you could continue playing it because it uses those same notes again. And you end up with... There's one more piece of music that I'm missing, isn't there? Song of Time. There we go. That's the other one. Song of Time. And that is straight up... We're back to D minor. We're definitely in D minor. There's no way you could rephrase... I mean, there is a way you could rephrase that. You could be... But again, when you're greeted with these 3 notes, only a madman would say, nah, that's not D minor, because it definitely is. And then we get that really cool B in there. So this is really interesting, right? I talked about those 5 notes being, part of it is minor, part of it is major, but also, D minor with a major 6 thrown in there, you get some really cool options there as well. This is kind of like a Dorian mode, right? So you get... Much, much more epic than the other tracks. Much more complicated melody, like continuing on from the 3 notes that you have to play to begin with. But again, real solid D minor, but with a ray of hope in there with that major 4th, not the minor 4th. Not, it's not... Doesn't sound right. So... kind of cool. All right, now we're on to the songs that you learn in the second half of the game. We've got the Minuet of Forest, which I believe is... The cool thing about this is that when you're in the second half of the game, the things that you're then required to learn are a little bit more complicated. All right, so originally we had super simple stuff. and 3-note patterns that repeat. Super simple. Now we get something a bit more complicated. Requires the player to put a little bit more cognitive effort into remembering things, and it's cool. It's like a difficulty progression in the music that you're learning, which is really cool. So the really cool thing about this, right, is that if you listen to that melody by itself, and I remember thinking this when I was originally taught it, here are the notes that you need to play. I was like, that's kind of weird, doesn't it? If you're just in D major, that's the safe, boring thing to do. But the cool thing is that that's not what the chords are. The chords are this. So we are in D major, but we haven't played a D major chord. We've played an E minor 7 and then an A. So the 2 and the 5, because that 2, 5, 1 would resolve to that. But yeah, you get. And then here's the bit where he's allowed to, embellish a bit. Which is really cool because you end up in E major, not D major. So there's a key change in the middle of that song. How cool is that? So next up, we have Bolero of Fire. This is really cool. I really, really love this piece of music because I don't really know why. It's just, it's really weird. Okay, so this is how it goes. Again, a bit more complicated, kind of a repeating thing, but it's 8 notes instead of like 6. And this is really cool because this is a bolero, which is like dum da 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 dum bum 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 bum, and then you get this crazy. Really goes for it in that, right? So really, like, this is when things are starting to get a bit more intense, a bit more serious. We need these pieces of music to really tie you to one place, and you get these chords. Isn't that cool? Really, really like intense. Love it. Serenade of Water. How does Serenade of Water go again? That doesn't help. Get out of my way. Okay, yeah, cool. So this is another really, really cool one, right? So these are the notes for Serenade of Water. And again, if you're just focusing on D minor, it sounds kind of weird. Doesn't really fit. But if you change the second chord to G major, you get this minor 1 major 4 thing again, which is again what we've already established is a pretty powerful move, and then you end up with this. So yeah, super powerful stuff. D minor to G major. Or whatever the second part of it is. A lot of these second half tracks, they do a little melody and then it just goes and ends on a major rather than a minor, which is kind of cool. So even if you're forced, so that's the really cool thing is that if Koji Kondo felt forced into writing in a minor key, at least after that bit where you play the original songs, the original notes, he's got the freedom to then turn it into a major if he wants to. So you end up with D minor, but then when you end it, it's to a D major. It's very cool. Next, we've got Nocturne of Shadow. This one is the weirdest one. This one I feel like, I don't know. This is a bit judgmental, and I'm probably wrong. But this one feels like it was like, I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything to do. I've used all the notes now because the melody here is really kind of weird. And it's one of those ones where you're like, okay, well, some of the other ones were kind of weird, but I wonder what the chords are. And the chords are this. And then it's something weird. It just seems a little bit like, I don't know. It's my least favorite track. I think the chords and everything underneath are, it's a bit scrape the barrel-y, which I feel harsh for saying because the guy's a legend. He's done, the whole game is amazing. But if I was to pick apart one of them, it probably would be that one. It just doesn't do a lot for me. It's just a bit random sounding. It's that. In the context of D, it's weird. The only two left, I believe, are Requiem of Spirit and Prelude of Light. Requiem of Spirit. So, again, similar kind of chords to like the Song of Storms. And that's a really interesting one because that's the only one where he doesn't embellish. He doesn't take the melody anywhere else. He doesn't do some crazy stuff that you can't play on the ocarina after that. It's just the same thing again, but with different chords underneath. So you could play that entire piece all the way through on the ocarina. And I really like those chords. I think it's really cool. Really simple, really powerful. And again, starts on a minor, ends on a major. Loads of these do that. It's cool. It's like you're seeing both sides of the coin, you know, light world, dark world. It's very cool. It's very clever. And I bet it's deliberate. Then the very last one we have here is Prelude of Light. Pretty simple and pretty easily malleable into different keys and stuff like that. You know, you could do something like that, but instead it's pretty simple. It's just a D major to a, I believe, G over D. And then this is the other bit I have a problem with, right? So this is how this one ends. No melody, just three very, very simple chords that get you back to where you were originally. That feels like it could have been a bit more embellished, right? We could have had something like... I don't know. Or maybe not. Maybe that's terrible. But it's kind of weird. So there we go. That was my analysis of the music from Ocarina of Time, specifically the ocarina music from Ocarina of Time. Koji Kondo, if you're watching this, which I'm sure you are, you're an absolute legend.